You know, for the longest time, I believed that if you worked hard and treated people right, you'd be safe. That your own family would be your fortress. I built a multi-million-dollar cosmetics empire from a formula I developed in my own kitchen sink. I thought I was living proof of the American dream. But then, my own daughter sued me, and in a single afternoon, I lost everything. She's no longer competent to run the company, my daughter Jessica said, her voice steady in the silent courtroom. She wouldn't even look at me. Beside her, her husband Leo nodded, a mask of fake concern plastered on his face. We're doing this to protect her. To protect the family legacy. The family legacy? I was the family legacy. My name, Catherine Vance, was on every product, every billboard, every contract. And now, I was being painted as a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own checkbook, let alone the $50 million company I bled for. The final blow came when the judge granted them temporary conservatorship over my assets and, with it, legal guardianship of my grandchildren. I was locked out of my own life. It's funny how quickly your world can burn down. Just 6 months ago, I was on top of the world. At 68, I was still the CEO of Vance Beauty, and I loved every minute of it. My husband, Richard, my partner in everything, had passed away from cancer 3 years prior, and the grief was still a raw, tender spot in my heart. But the work, and my family, kept me going. Jessica, my only child, was the company's head of marketing. I thought I was grooming her to take over one day. She and Leo lived in a beautiful home I had bought for them, and their 10-year-old twins, Mia and Noah, were the absolute center of my universe. I thought we were close. I thought they loved me. How could I have been so blind? The change was subtle at first. It began with Leo. Leo was a man who had a portfolio of failed startups and a mountain of charm. He'd always been a little too slick for my taste, but he made Jessica happy, so I welcomed him into the family. After Richard died, Leo started taking a much more active interest in the business. He'd suggest new ventures, risky investments that went against the steady, debt-free growth model that Richard and I had always sworn by. Catherine, you've got to adapt, he'd say during our weekly board meetings. The market is all about aggressive expansion now. We're sitting on a dragon's hoard of cash. We need to use it. I'd politely shut him down. We grow smart, Leo. Not fast. That's the Vance way. I could see the flash of frustration in his eyes, but it would vanish as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that easy smile. Then, small things started to go wrong. A crucial email from a supplier would go missing from my inbox, and Leo would swoop in, saying, "Don't worry, Catherine, I handled it. You probably just deleted it by accident." A meeting I was certain was on a Tuesday would be on a Wednesday, and I'd show up a day late, looking foolish and disorganized. Jessica would pull me aside later, her brow furrowed with worry. "Mom, are you feeling all right? You've been a little scattered lately." It was a slow, insidious drip of doubt. They were poisoning the well, not with chemicals, but with suggestions. They made me question my own mind. The real ambush came on a Sunday afternoon. I had just finished baking cookies with Mia and Noah, and the house smelled of chocolate and vanilla. The kids were in the backyard, their laughter floating through the open window. It was a perfect, peaceful day. Jessica and Leo asked me to sit down in the living room. The same room where Richard and I had planned out the entire future of our company on the back of a napkin. "Mom," Jessica started, twisting a ring on her finger. "Leo and I have been talking. And we're worried about you." I felt a familiar chill creep up my spine. "Worried about what, honey?" "I feel fine. Business is better than ever." Leo leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, adopting a tone of deep, sincere gravity. "Catherine, that's not entirely true. That big deal with the European distributor. It fell through because you missed the final deadline to submit the paperwork. We lost millions." My blood ran cold. "What? That's not possible. I sent that paperwork a week ahead of schedule. I have the sent receipt from the courier." Leo shook his head slowly, a sad look in his eyes. "There's no record of it, Catherine. The courier company has no pickup order from that day. We think you might have forgotten to send it." It was a lie. It had to be a lie. I was meticulous. Richard had called me the most organized person he'd ever met. I would never make a mistake like that. Not with millions of dollars on the line. "I didn't forget," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was trying to suppress. "Someone is messing with my office." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. "Mom, please. Don't get paranoid. This is what we're talking about. You're getting defensive, you're forgetting things. Last week, you called me by your sister's name. The week before, you left the car running in the driveway all night. A few minor slips. The kind of things anyone my age might do when they're stressed and grieving. But they were weaving these tiny threads into a thick rope to hang me with." "What are you trying to say, Jessica?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Leo stood up and put his hand on my daughter's shoulder. He was the one in control. What we're saying, Catherine, is that the stress of running this empire is too much for you now. It's time to step back. For your own health, and for the good of the company. Step back? I asked, laughing without any humor. This company is my life. Richard and I built it from nothing. And we want to honor that, Jessica said, her voice pleading. That's why we've spoken to our lawyers. We think the best course of action is to file for a conservatorship. We'll manage the business and your finances, so you don't have to worry about anything. You can relax, spend time with Mia and Noah. Just enjoy your retirement. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Conservatorship. It was a legal cage. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to steal my company, my money, my entire life, right out from under me. All the pieces clicked into place. The missing emails, the rescheduled meetings, Leo's constant pushing for control. It had all been a long, carefully planned coup. No, I said, standing up. My legs felt steadier than I expected. Absolutely not. This is my company. This is my home. You will not take it from me. Now, I think it's time for you both to leave. Leo's charming facade finally cracked. A flicker of pure, cold fury flashed in his eyes before he could mask it. You can do this the easy way, Catherine, or the hard way, he said, his voice dropping to a near hiss. But either way, we are taking over. A judge will see it's what's best. That was the declaration of war. In the weeks that followed, they used my money to hire a team of ruthless lawyers. They presented their manufactured evidence, sworn affidavits from employees Leo had either bribed or threatened. A psychiatric evaluation from a doctor I'd never met who claimed I was showing signs of senile dementia. And doctored financial reports that made it look like the company was failing under my leadership. I walked out of that courthouse a ghost. I wasn't allowed back into my own home. I wasn't allowed into the offices of the company I built. My credit cards were frozen. My phone was cut off. They took my grandchildren and told them their grandma was very sick and needed to go away for a long time. I had nothing left but a few $1,000s in cash I kept for emergencies and an old, forgotten property Richard had bought years ago, a small, secluded lake house a few hours north of the city. As I packed a single suitcase in my judicially mandated 10-minute visit to my own house, with Leo watching me like a hawk, I felt a despair so deep I thought it would swallow me whole. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. But as I walked out the door, I remembered something Richard used to say, the best time to plan your counterattack is when your enemy is celebrating their victory. And I knew. Somewhere, somehow, Richard would have left me a way to fight back. I just had to find it. The drive to the lake house was a 3-hour blur of green trees and gray asphalt. The taxi driver, a kind man who must have seen the utter ruin in my eyes, didn't say much. He just helped me with my single suitcase and left me on the gravel driveway. The silence that descended when his car disappeared was absolute. It was the sound of total, crushing isolation. Richard had bought this place as our secret getaway. A place to escape the demands of the business, to watch the sunset over the water, to just be Catherine and Richard, not the Vances of Vance Beauty. But we were always so busy building our dream that we rarely made it out here. Now, it looked as tired and forgotten as I felt. The paint was peeling on the wooden shutters, and weeds were starting to reclaim the stone pathway. Inside, everything was covered in a thin layer of dust and the faint, musty smell of a house left unloved. Ghosts of a happier time were everywhere. The worn armchair where Richard used to read for hours. The half-finished puzzle on the card table we'd abandoned on our last visit. The faint scratch marks on the doorframe where we'd measured Mia and Noah's height years ago. I ran my hand over them, and that's when the dam broke. I sat on the dusty floor, leaned my head against the wall, and I wept. I cried for my husband, for the grandchildren I couldn't see, and for the daughter I no longer knew. I cried until I had nothing left. For 2 days, I did nothing. I drifted through the silent house like a specter, the despair a physical weight on my shoulders. On the 3rd day, something shifted. I woke up and saw the sun glinting off the lake, and I heard Richard's voice in my head, as clear as if he were standing next to me. Okay, Kath, enough feeling sorry for yourself. What's the plan? He was right. Richard was a planner. He never entered a negotiation without knowing his opponent's weaknesses. He never launched a product without a 5-year projection. He would never, ever have left me unprotected. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I decided to start in his study. It was the one room in the house that was entirely his. Bookshelves filled with biographies of great leaders and thinkers, a heavy oak desk, and a leather chair that still held the faint scent of his aftershave. It was tidy, just as he'd left it. But Richard's tidiness was a very specific thing. He called it organized chaos, but I knew it was a system. And as I ran my duster over his bookshelf, I noticed something was out of place. One of his favorite books, a thick biography of Winston Churchill, was sticking out by less than a quarter of an inch. Richard was meticulous about his books. They were always perfectly flush with the edge of the shelf. My heart started to beat a little faster. I pulled the heavy book from its spot, and as I did, I heard a soft click. Behind it, a small section of the bookshelf had recessed into the wall, revealing a dark cavity. And inside, gleaming in the dim light, was a small, black metal safe. My hands trembled as I reached for it. It had a digital keypad, 6 digits. This was it. This was the contingency plan. My mind raced, trying to think of what numbers Richard would have used. Our anniversary? The twins' birthday? The date the company was founded? I tried them all. Each time, a small red light flashed. Error. I sank into his chair, staring at the keypad. What was I missing? Richard was pragmatic, but he was also a romantic. He valued moments, not just numbers. I closed my eyes and thought back to the very beginning. Before the company, before the money. Back to when we were just 2 kids with a dream, working out of our tiny apartment kitchen. I remembered the exact day, sitting at our rickety table, when he sketched our first logo on a cocktail napkin. He always said that was the moment Vance Beauty was truly born. With a surge of adrenaline, I punched in the date, August 23, '85. The light on the keypad flashed green, and the safe emitted a low, satisfying thud as the lock disengaged. Inside, there was no pile of cash or gold bars. There was something far more valuable. There was a thick, black ledger, a small digital voice recorder, and a sealed manila envelope with a single phrase written on the front in Richard's familiar, strong handwriting, "For my Catherine. In case of emergency." I opened the envelope first. The letter began, "My dearest Kath, if you are reading this, it means that Snake has finally shed his skin, and I am not there to protect you. Please don't be angry that I kept this from you. After my diagnosis, I didn't want to burden your heart with my suspicions. But I couldn't leave you unprepared." My eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. They weren't tears of despair, but of overwhelming love and gratitude. He had known. He had suspected Leo all along. The letter continued, "Leo is a predator, Kath. He has a history. I hired a private investigator a year before I got sick. He's not just a failed businessman. He's a con artist who preys on successful families. He leaves a trail of debt and broken promises wherever he goes. He didn't marry our Jessica because he loved her. He married her for her name. He married her to get to you. To get to our life's work." Next, I picked up the black ledger. It was filled with Richard's precise, neat script. It was a complete dossier on Leo. Page after page detailed his past. Failed tech startups funded by loans he never repaid. A luxury car rental business that went bankrupt under mysterious circumstances. But the most damning part was the last section. Richard had uncovered a network of shell corporations Leo had set up. Using his access as Jessica's husband, he had been subtly manipulating invoices and expense reports for years, siphoning small amounts of money from Vance Beauty. It was death by 1,000 cuts. A few thousand here, a few thousand there, small enough to fly under the radar, but over 5 years, it added up to nearly $2 million. He had been stealing from us from the very beginning. The failed European deal he blamed on me? Richard's notes suggested Leo had deliberately sabotaged it to make me look incompetent. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pick up the voice recorder. I pressed play. Richard's voice came on first, calm and professional. "Leo, I've been looking at this proposal for the hostile takeover of the Levine brand. It's too risky. It goes against everything we stand for." Then I heard Leo's voice, slick and condescending. "With all due respect, Richard, your way is the old way. It's slow. It's safe. It's boring. This company is a sleeping giant. It could be 10 times bigger if it were run by someone willing to pull the trigger. It's my name on the door, Leo." Richard's voice was firm. "And my wife's. We don't gamble with our legacy." There was a pause, and then Leo laughed. It was a cold, chilling sound, completely devoid of warmth. "For now," he said. "But people get old, Richard. They get tired. They lose their edge. And when they do, someone with a real vision needs to be there to step in. Jessica understands that. It's only a matter of time." The recording ended. I sat there in the silent study, the recorder clutched in my hand. The air had been sucked from my lungs. It was all there. The motive, the method, the sheer, cold-blooded arrogance of his plan. He had been plotting this for years. He had turned my own daughter against me, not just to steal my company, but because he saw me, he saw both of us, as outdated obstacles to his grand ambition. The grief and shock that had paralyzed me for days began to burn away, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a very long time, pure, undiluted rage. A cold, clear fury settled deep in my bones. Leo hadn't just underestimated an old woman who was grieving her husband. He had underestimated that husband's love for his wife. And he had no idea of the storm that was about to break over his head. Richard had given me the ammunition. Now, it was time for me to go to war. The rage that settled in my chest was as cold and clear as the lake water outside my window. For the first time in months, I wasn't a victim. I was a woman with a mission. Richard had left me a roadmap, a blueprint for justice, and I was going to follow it to the letter. His letter had one final, crucial instruction. Kath, you can't fight this alone. Leo has insulated himself legally. You need a shark, and I have the best one on a retainer he doesn't even know about. Call Arthur Sterling. He was my roommate in college, and he's the sharpest, most ruthless corporate lawyer in the state. I told him a version of this might happen one day. He's been waiting for your call for 3 years. Tell him it's time to cash in Richard's last chit. Arthur Sterling. I remembered him from years ago, a tall, imposing man with piercing blue eyes and a mind that moved like lightning. He and Richard had a bond forged in late-night study sessions and cheap beer, a friendship that had lasted a lifetime. I found a disposable cell phone at a gas station an hour away and dialed his private number from memory. A crisp, no-nonsense secretary answered. Mr. Sterling's office. This is Catherine Vance, I said, my voice steady. Please tell him I'm calling to cash in Richard's last chit. There was a brief silence on the other end. And then, hold, please, Mrs. Vance. Less than 10 seconds later, Arthur's deep voice was on the line. Catherine. I was wondering when you'd call. I read about the conservatorship in the papers. It didn't sound like the Richard the First knew, or the woman he married. Where are you? At the lake house, I replied. And I have something you need to see. Something Richard left for me. Stay put, he commanded. Don't talk to anyone. Don't use your credit cards. I'll be there at dawn. The next morning, a sleek black car rolled up the gravel driveway. Arthur Sterling stepped out, looking exactly as I remembered, only with a little more gray at the temples. He carried a worn leather briefcase and had an expression that was equal parts concern and intense focus. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I led him to the study, laid out the ledger, the recorder, and the letter on Richard's desk, and said, my husband believed my son-in-law was a predator. He was right. For the next 2 hours, Arthur was silent. He read every word of the letter, examined every entry in the ledger, and listened to the recording twice, his face growing harder and colder with every passing minute. When he was done, he clicked the recorder off and looked at me, his blue eyes blazing with a loyalty that moved me to tears. That magnificent bastard, he said, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. Even from the grave, Richard is 3 steps ahead of everyone else. This isn't just evidence, Catherine. This is a nuke. He snapped his briefcase open on the desk. He was all business now. Here's how we play this. We don't go to the press. We don't send them a warning shot. We move in total silence. We get them before they even know they're in a fight. He began pacing the room, his mind clearly working at a furious pace. First, the civil front. I'll draft an emergency motion to vacate the conservatorship based on evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and undue influence. Richard's ledger gives us probable cause. It's the key that unlocks everything else. We'll file it under seal. The judge will see it, but Leo and Jessica won't. He stopped and looked at me. Second, the criminal front. The embezzlement Richard documented, this is wire fraud. It's a federal crime. The recording of Leo admitting his intent to take over the company is proof of conspiracy. I have a friend in the U.S. Attorney's Office who despises silver-spooned crooks like Leo. He'll be very interested in this recording. My head was spinning, but a fierce, wild hope was blooming in my chest. For the first time, I could see a path out of the darkness. But then Arthur's face softened slightly, and he asked the question I had been dreading, Catherine. What about Jessica? She's on all the legal documents. She stood up in court and testified against you. Legally, she's just as culpable as he is. When this goes down, she could face charges, too. I need to know how you want to handle your daughter. My breath caught in my throat. Jessica. My little girl. The child I had raised, loved, and trusted. I saw her face in my mind, not the cold, distant woman in the courtroom, but the 10-year-old who used to fall asleep in my lap. I knew Leo had poisoned her mind, twisted her perspective with lies and manipulation. She was a victim, too, albeit a willing one. He's the snake, Arthur, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Leo is the one who orchestrated this. I want him ruined. I want him to pay for what he did to Richard's company and what he did to my family. But Jessica. She's my daughter. I want to save her, not destroy her. Arthur nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. All right. We'll frame the narrative that way. We'll position Leo as the master manipulator and Jessica as the coerced, grieving daughter under his influence. It might not save her from all legal trouble, but it will give the DA a reason to offer her a deal in exchange for her testimony against her husband. But you need to be prepared, Catherine. She chose him over you. That's a wound that doesn't heal easily. I knew he was right. But I had to try, so, what's the first move? I asked. The first move is silent, Arthur said, a predatory gleam in his eye. Richard's ledger gives us the names of Leo's shell corporations. Tomorrow morning, I will file an ex parte motion with a federal judge to freeze the assets of every one of those accounts pending a fraud investigation. Leo won't get a notification. He'll just wake up and find out his secret piggy bank is empty. And we'll get an order to mirror the Vance Beauty servers. We'll have every email, every file, every deleted document he thought he'd hidden forever. The plan was beautiful in its ruthlessness. It was a strategy Richard would have admired. We spent the rest of the day planning. Arthur arranged for a secure apartment for me in the city, a place where no one could find me. He brought in a forensic accounting team, old colleagues he trusted implicitly, who began the work of turning Richard's ledger into an ironclad legal case. For the first time since I'd walked out of that courtroom, I felt a sense of power. I was no longer Catherine Vance, the confused old woman. I was the hidden queen on the chessboard, being guided by the ghost of my king. About to put my enemies in checkmate. The scene I kept imagining, the one that got me through the long, lonely night, was of Leo. I pictured him sitting in my office, in Richard's chair, basking in the glow of his victory. He'd be making some arrogant pronouncement, firing a loyal employee, or spending my money on some flashy, extravagant toy. And then, his phone would buzz. It would be a text from his bank. An alert. A simple, devastating message: account frozen. Please contact Fraud Prevention Services. And in that moment, his entire stolen world would begin to shatter. Leo Moretti felt like a king on a throne. He was sitting in his office, his feet propped up on the polished mahogany desk. He swirled a ridiculously expensive scotch in a crystal glass, looking out over the city skyline. He'd just gotten off a conference call, bullying a smaller competitor into a corner. This was the power he'd always craved, the respect he knew he deserved. He was finally in control. That's when the first notification chimed on his phone. A text from a Swiss bank he used for his more creative accounting. Unusual activity alert. Account access temporarily restricted. He frowned. A glitch, probably. Then, another chime. An email from a bank in the Caymans. The subject line was stark, urgent, federal court subpoena, asset freeze. The glass in his hand trembled. He put it down with a thud. His blood went cold. He scrambled for his laptop, his hands fumbling on the keyboard. He tried to log into his primary domestic account, the one where he'd consolidated the first of his siphoned funds. A red banner flashed across the screen: access denied. This account has been frozen by order of the United States District Court. It wasn't a glitch. It was an attack. Coordinated, silent, and devastating. Every secret account, every shell corporation, every dollar he had stolen and hidden away, all of it, frozen in an instant. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He grabbed his phone and called Jessica. "Someone's coming after us," he said, his voice a harsh, panicked whisper. "All my accounts have been frozen. It's a full-blown financial assault. Did you say anything to anyone? Did you use a card you weren't supposed to?" "What? No. Leo, what's going on?" Jessica's voice was thin with fear. There was a pause, and he heard the crinkle of paper. "Leo, there's a man at the door. A courier. He just handed me, oh my God. It's a subpoena. From the U.S. Attorney's Office. They want every financial record we have for the last 5 years. They want me to appear for a deposition." She was starting to hyperventilate. "Leo, what did you do?" "What did I do?" He snarled, the charming facade evaporating to reveal the desperate animal beneath. "What did we do, Jessica? You signed the papers, too. Get a hold of yourself. It's probably just a competitor trying to rattle us. A fishing expedition. We just have to stay calm." But he wasn't calm. He was terrified. This wasn't a competitor. This was surgical. Someone knew where to look. Meanwhile, in a sterile, glass-walled conference room miles away, I was watching the first victory of the war. Arthur had set up a command center, and his forensic accounting team had been digging through the mirrored Vance Beauty servers for 48 hours straight. "We found it," Catherine, a young, brilliant analyst named Maria said, her eyes wide with excitement. She turned her monitor toward me. Leo was smart. He used military-grade deletion software. But Richard had a triple redundancy backup system built into the server that Leo didn't know about. It took us 2 days to crack, but we got in. On the screen was an email. It was from Leo's account, sent to a personal, untraceable address, dated 2 days before the European deal collapsed. The message was short and utterly damning: "The Vance Dupre paperwork is ready for courier pickup tomorrow. Make sure it never leaves the building. We need this deal to die." I stared at the words, my vision blurring. This was it. The smoking gun. The undeniable, concrete proof that he had framed me. He had orchestrated my downfall from the very beginning. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. "This is the kill shot, Catherine," he said, his voice a low, grim hum. "Now, we go back to the judge. We don't just ask to end the conservatorship. We file for an immediate injunction to have them forcibly removed from the company. We take back the keys to your kingdom. But before we launch the final assault, I needed to make one last attempt to save my daughter." Arthur arranged for a discreet courier. I sent a small, plain box to Jessica at my home. Inside, there was no legal document, no threat. Just a single, faded photograph from 20 years ago. It was the three of us, me, Richard, and a smiling, gap-toothed Jessica on her 10th birthday, her face smeared with chocolate cake. On the back, I had written a message in my own hand. "He is not the man you think he is. It is not too late to choose your family. Your father knew everything." The package arrived in the middle of a screaming match between Jessica and Leo. He was pacing the living room like a caged tiger, his paranoia spiraling. When Jessica opened the box and saw the photo, she went pale. She read the note, and her hand flew to her mouth. "What is that?" Leo demanded, snatching it from her. He read the note, and a sneer twisted his features. "Your father knew everything? Your father was a dying old man. And your mother is pathetic, sending you old pictures. Are you really falling for this sentimental garbage?" "My father was not pathetic," Jessica whispered, a flicker of defiance in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "He was the smartest man I ever knew." "What did he know, Leo? What does this mean?" "It means your mother is trying to play mind games," he shouted, throwing the photo onto the table. "She's trying to divide us. Are you with me, or are you with her? Because you need to decide right now." His rage, his fear, the way he dismissed her father, it was all starting to break through the years of manipulation. For the first time, Jessica looked at her husband and saw not a charming, ambitious visionary, but a terrified bully. She didn't have to answer him. The next afternoon, the war came to them. Arthur's injunction had been granted. At the Vance Beauty headquarters, Leo and Jessica were in the main boardroom, arguing with the senior management team about plummeting stock prices since the news of the leadership change. Suddenly, the doors swung open. 2 U.S. Marshals stepped into the room, followed by a calm, gray-haired woman in a business suit. My former assistant, Helen, a woman who had been with me for 30 years and whom Leo had demoted to the mailroom, watched from the hallway. It was the moment she had been praying for. One of the marshals held up a document. "Leo Moretti? Jessica Moretti? By order of the United States District Court, an immediate injunction has been placed against you. You are to cease all business operations immediately. This is Ms. Albright. She is the court-appointed receiver who will be taking temporary control of Vance Beauty, effective now." The entire room went silent. Leo's face turned ashen. Jessica looked like she was going to faint. "You can't do this," Leo stammered, his voice weak. "We are the legal conservators. This company is ours." The marshal's expression didn't change. "That is a matter for the court to decide, sir. For now, you will collect your personal belongings from your offices. You have 5 minutes. Then you will be escorted from the premises." In front of the entire senior staff, in front of the employees they had lied to and bullied, Leo and Jessica were marched out of the boardroom. As they passed Helen in the hallway, she met their stunned, horrified gazes with a small, quiet, triumphant smile. The king and queen had been deposed. I had taken my castle back. The news of Leo and Jessica's public removal from Vance Beauty spread through the business world like a wildfire. It was a corporate earthquake. For me, watching from the quiet security of Arthur's temporary office, it wasn't about triumph. It was a necessary, painful surgery to save the life of the company Richard and I had created. The first part of the war was over, but I knew the final battle, the one for my daughter's soul, was yet to come. That night, my burner phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mom?" It was Jessica. Her voice was small, broken, and stripped of all the confidence and defiance she had worn for months. It was the voice of a lost child. "I'm here, Jessica," I said, keeping my own voice even. Though 1,000 emotions were crashing through me. "He lied," she whispered, her words punctuated by ragged sobs. "All this time? He lied about everything. The European deal? The finances? Dad." Her voice cracked on the last word. "He told me Dad was losing his mind at the end, that he was the one making bad decisions. He twisted everything." Leo, in his desperation, had overplayed his hand. In trying to control the narrative after they were thrown out, he had started attacking Richard's memory, and in doing so, he had finally revealed the monster behind the mask. "Where are you?" I asked gently. "A hotel." I can't go back to the house. It's not our house. It's your house. Everything is yours." She was finally seeing the truth. We met the next day in the neutral territory of Arthur's conference room. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she seemed to have shrunk into herself. I didn't yell. I didn't say, "I told you so." I simply slid 3 things across the polished table towards her: Richard's letter, the black ledger, and the voice recorder. "Your father loved you more than anything in this world, Jessica," I said softly. "He saw the danger you were in long before I did. He did all of this to protect you, too." She spent the next hour reading, listening, and crying. She saw the evidence of Leo's embezzlement in her father's own handwriting. She heard the cold contempt in her husband's voice as he plotted to take over the company. She read Richard's words, filled with a father's desperate love and fear for his only child. This wasn't my testimony against her husband. It was her father's. By the time she was finished, she was completely broken, but in that brokenness, there was a chance for her to heal. "What do I do now?" she asked, looking up at me, her face a mess of tears and shame. "You tell the truth," I said. "You help us make this right." And she did. Jessica became the U.S. Attorney's star witness. Her testimony, detailing Leo's years of manipulation, his calculated plan to isolate her from me, and his confession to her about sabotaging the company, was the final, inescapable nail in his legal coffin. Faced with his assets frozen, his wife testifying against him, and a mountain of irrefutable evidence, Leo crumbled. Arthur presented him with a take-it-or-leave-it plea deal. He would plead guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy. He would agree to a divorce, relinquishing any and all claims to the Vance family assets. In return, he would serve 7 years in federal prison instead of the 20 he would have faced at trial. He took the deal. The final court hearing was a quiet, somber affair. There were no flashing cameras, just the grim finality of justice. I was there, with Jessica by my side. Leo stood before the judge, a shrunken, pathetic figure, a universe away from the arrogant king who had propped his feet on my desk. He mumbled his guilty plea, his eyes fixed on the floor. Before passing sentence, the judge looked directly at me. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice resonating through the silent courtroom. "This court formally and permanently dissolves the fraudulent conservatorship. All assets, properties, and rights are restored to you. I have reviewed the evidence compiled by your late husband. Let the record show that his foresight and prudence are the only reasons his legacy was not destroyed. This family, and this company, owe him a debt that can never be repaid." He then turned to Leo. "Mr. Moretti, you betrayed the trust of a family that welcomed you. You manipulated a daughter and tried to destroy a mother. You are a predator of the highest order. 7 years will not be enough to repay the damage you have caused, but it is a start." As the marshals led him away, Leo looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his eyes anymore. Just the hollow emptiness of a man who had gambled everything and lost. The months that followed were about rebuilding. Not just the company, but our family. I returned to my role as CEO, not because I had to, but because I loved it. I promoted Helen, my loyal assistant, to Chief Operating Officer. Together, we began to heal the corporate culture Leo had poisoned. Jessica's path was harder. She moved into a small apartment and started therapy. She didn't ask for a job at the company. She knew she had to find her own way, to build an identity separate from me and the shadow she felt she could never escape. She started taking classes at the local university, studying social work. For the first time, she was doing something that was entirely for herself. Our relationship wasn't the same, the scars were too deep for that, but it was real. We were slowly, carefully, learning to be mother and daughter again. 1 year after the sentencing, I was at the lake house. It was no longer a place of exile, but our sanctuary again. The afternoon sun was warm, and the air smelled of pine needles and fresh-baked cookies. Mia and Noah were chasing each other on the lawn, their laughter the sweetest sound in the world. Jessica was sitting with me on the porch, watching them. "He wrote me a letter," she said quietly, not looking at me. "From prison." "What did it say?" I asked. "The same old lies. That he did it for us. That I should wait for him." She shook her head. "I threw it in the fire. He has no power over me anymore." She finally turned to me, and for the first time in years, I saw a genuine, unburdened smile on her face. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me." "Never," I said, taking her hand. Later that evening, as the sun set over the lake in a blaze of orange and purple, I held Richard's picture. I had lost so much, but I had gained something, too. I had learned that a legacy isn't just about the empire you build, but about the strength you find when it's all taken away. It's about the wisdom to forgive and the courage to rebuild. And I learned that true love, the kind Richard and I shared, is a fortress. It's a guiding light that can reach you even from beyond the grave, showing you the way back home. The battle was over. And we had won. What an incredible journey of betrayal and resilience. Catherine's story is a powerful reminder of how strong a person can be, even when they lose everything. What do you think is the biggest lesson from her experience? Was there a moment in the story that truly shocked you? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have a story about overcoming a deep betrayal, please feel free to share it with our community. If you found this story meaningful, show your support by giving this video a like. It truly helps us create more content just like this. And of course, if you don't want to miss our next dramatic story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell. Thank you for spending your time with us today. No matter what storms you may be weathering in your own life, remember that the sun will shine again. May you find the strength to navigate the chaos and find your own well-deserved peace.